Hey everybody, how's it going? My name's Paul Morton and I'm a freelance photographer in sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. Now usually I shoot cars, motorcycles, or people on location. Today though, I wanted to try and get some pictures of my old school BMX bikes in a studio. The thing is I don't want to pay for a studio. They're kind of expensive and I'm super cheap. My goal here is to make a video to show you guys the cheapest and easiest way to get photo studio looking shots of your bikes at home without spending a boatload of money. Here's what I did. To create the photo studio look in my garage, I started with a roll of Savage Super White Seamless Backdrop paper. It's 107 inches wide by 12 yards long. It's about $100, regardless of if you buy it locally or order online. I started by laying out 7 foot across the bottom and 7 foot up the back. There's about 2 sections this long in the roll, so you could split it with a buddy. You want to tape down the front edge so it doesn't roll up on you and you don't trip over it. To support the back, I'm using backdrop stands. I know most people don't have these. Now you probably could rent them, but you could also devise a way to safely and securely hold that roll of paper just like that. Once you have your seamless secured at the top, use a clamp to keep it from rolling, and then make sure you have a nice round transition from the back wall to the floor. Also make sure there's no wrinkles in the seamless that might show up in the picture. Before you put your bike on the paper, clean it completely and get it set up how you want it. You don't want to be going back, taking it off the paper, putting it back and making adjustments, because every time you move the bike on the paper, you get the paper itself dirty. Don't forget the little details. You may not see this stuff when you're looking at your bike, but when you're staring at a still photograph, all of a sudden it jumps out at you and you'll had wished you had cleaned it. Okay, everything's in place and we're almost ready to go. But before you break out that camera, let's attend to a few details. You may notice that the wheels are clocked in the same position. And by that I mean the valve stems are at the bottom facing up on both wheels. Also, the cranks are in a specific position. I like them angled back like this so that they're not parallel with the seat tube and that the drive side crank arm does not cover the down tube, especially the logo. Finally, I clock the pedals. I like them flat like that. But basically, just put everything in a position so that it's even, neat, and orderly. It should look good after all the trouble we've gone through. The hardest part of this is, how do you support the bike? Honestly, I had no idea because I'd never done this before. So I looked around my garage and found this metal rod that's used for wire shelving. It's already white. It seemed like it would work perfect, and it's honestly not that bad. All I had to do was drill a slightly larger hole at the end that accommodated the axle, use the existing axle nut with an added washer so I didn't scratch the bike. You might notice that little shim at the bottom too. It's a plastic toilet shim, another thing that was just rolling around my toolbox. This keeps the bike from rolling backwards in this case. You could put one at the front of the wheel, one at the back, whatever it takes so the bike doesn't roll one way or the other. The steel bar, it's kind of sketchy. The bike is barely balanced there. So if you have a super expensive bike and you're worried about it, this might not be the route for you. I did 3 bikes this way. I felt comfortable with it. So you just have to find the solution that works for you, that'll hold your bike up, and work with your Photoshop skills. Another thing I tried before this was a coffee can under the pedal. Of course, the cranks weren't clocked the way I wanted them, and that was going to be harder to Photoshop out. Anyway, find the solution that works for you as far as supporting your bike. Okay, last thing before I break out the camera. Foam core. You see those big white panels around the bike? That's foam core. Unfortunately, it's kind of expensive and you'd have no other use for it. I happen to have some because I'm a photographer, but you can use any white surface. If you have a fold-out reflector, a piece of white cardboard, a white bed sheet, anything will work. You just want to reflect white into the bike. Now specifically that's for chrome and polished bikes like this one, because everything shows up in them. Let me show you what the foam core does. Here's a shot of the frame without the foam core reflected in it, and here's what happens when you slide the foam core into place. Certainly I think that looks a lot better. This is really important with chrome or polished bikes, but is also beneficial with painted bikes. So here's how I determined the correct exposure for this shot. I started with my camera's maximum sync speed, which is 1/200th of a second. Then I started at f8, which is a great starting point, and my lowest ISO, which is ISO 100. I can actually go lower than that, but this is the camera's native ISO and a great starting point. I also always shoot on RAW. Then I focused about a third of the way into the bike. Around where the logo is on the down tube is a great spot to start. The flashing lights mean those are blown highlights. So I have two choices now. I can either narrow down the aperture, which is what I'm going to do, to f11, or I could lower the power on the strobes. But I want the depth of field of f11 to make sure the front and rear tires are both in focus. But you dial down the aperture, take another shot, and I know f11 was my sweet spot on this shot, and we can see by the histogram, it's still to the right, which is what I want, but it's not all the way to the right. There's still, you see there's a small gap. Also, there's no blinkies. I mean, there are some small blinking lights, and you're going to get some direct reflections from the softboxes that do that. It's almost impossible to avoid, especially in a chrome bike like this. Because I have this stuff, I'm using two Godox 600 watt mono lights with the extension cords so that I can use them on my boom stands. Attached to that are two 30-inch by 44-inch Godox softboxes. These are actually really cheap. They're $50 for the pair. But if you're not going to be into photography that much, it's probably not worth investing in. Again, maybe you have a buddy who has some and will help you out with your photos. You could rent the stuff, but also I'll show you some stuff later to do it without this. So my goal here was to make basically a big light bank. This was big with car photography. The relative size to these softboxes is bigger than the bike. They're about 88 inches long, the bike's much less than that. So it's going to produce a nice soft light. And at the angle these are shooting down at, they illuminate the paper, make everything a nice bright white, and illuminate the bike nicely. Okay, here we go. So I have my camera in hand and I'm going to start shooting. I'd like to start up high and work my way down low. Next, I'm going to walk around and shoot details. Of course, I took off my shoes if I'm going to go on the paper. But go around and shoot all the things you like, the bars, the stem, the cranks. Any details you want, now's the time to get them. I realize not everyone has the big lights and soft boxes like I used in the first setup, so I also want to shoot this with these speed lights. A speed light is just an on-camera flash, but you can use them off-camera like this. There's one to the right and one over there on the far left, that little dot. Those are the only lights contributing to the exposure. The overhead neon lights don't actually contribute to the exposure because I'm shooting at 1/200th of a second. So my settings were actually the same, and I'm honestly a little surprised. It was 1/200th of a second, f8. All I had to do was bump my ISO from 100 to 125. Now the big soft boxes offer soft light due to their size. The speed lights are small, so they should have hard light. The trick is you bounce them off the ceiling. So I have a white ceiling. So if I bounce this small hard light source off the ceiling, I get a larger light source, and it's soft, just like soft boxes. So let's see if this will work on a cell phone. Now my garage is a little different. I've got 6 double tube neon lights on the ceiling. So my garage is pretty bright. And all the walls and ceiling are white. But I know it looks good so far in camera, but can I make it work? It's a little dark. So we'll focus on the bike and increase the exposure, which I think actually looks pretty good. And take a picture. And I'll be honest, for a cell phone picture, I do think that looks pretty good. Not to mention, you can shoot RAW on some new cell phone cameras, and you can control the settings a lot more than I just did. But honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. Not too bad. So there you have it. There's several ways to shoot a bike in your garage and make it look like you're in a studio. Well, that's it. That's how I did it. Certainly this is not the only way to get the job done. But for me, it was the quickest and easiest way to get the results I wanted. With any luck, there's a few tips and tricks in there that will help you get better images of your bikes without breaking the bank. If you like this video, I would really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button. And if you'd like to see more videos about shooting cars and motorcycles on location, please hit subscribe. I'm going to do some more stuff like this, but I will work on the video and audio quality. Thanks everybody.